Welcome back inside of Mission Control Houston. Pretty special treat right now. We have former Expedition 29 Commander Mike Fossum with me. Mike, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Hey, you bet. It's great to be back in Mission Control.
Yeah, we always love having you on. So we have 3 more astronauts getting ready to launch this Saturday. So why don't you walk us through a little bit about what they're doing, the week before launch?
Oh, you bet. It's exciting right now for Yuri Malenchenko, the Soyuz commander, Suni Williams, and Aki Hoshide. They've been in training for about 2.5 years, and so it's really a neat time right now. As they're after all of this training, they've been training around the globe. The United States, Russia, Japan, Canada, Germany, and
all over the place.
all over.
Yep.
And been on for Suni and Aki. They've been on the road about 50% of the time for the last 2.5 years, and all of this training is finally coming together. And they've been in Kazakhstan and Baikonur Cosmodrome for about a week and a half. We arrived there 2 weeks before the launch, and so it's really it's a fascinating time because it's very different. And that 2.5 years is busy, but in ways it feels like you're just moving, or you're not really moving. You're not getting any closer. You're just going through the motions. You're packing your bag. You're doing more training, and you get closer and closer. And at this point, though, as they're in Baikonur, going through the final fit checks and final training, and you can feel things picking up speed, and just your life seems to be accelerating.
Oh yeah.
As I think of it as like floating on a big, long, lazy river, and that river's dropping into a slot canyon now, and you can feel it. Everything's a little more frantic, a little busier, and you're going through some of these things for the last time finally, and so your whole world is picking up speed, and it's going to continue to accelerate for them all the way up to when they head out to the launch pad on Monday. And it's there's a lot of traditions and stuff too, so it's a very exciting time. It's a neat thing. Suni and Aki both launched on the space shuttle for their first flights, and so this is very different for them to be going, through the preparations to launch on the Russian Soyuz rocket. And there's all the training, of course, is very different, as they have gone through so many different things. When they get to Baikonur, though, part of what they do is actual fit checks with the real rocket. And the crews we spend a lot of time in trainers, which are actually flown Soyuz capsules that have been modified to make into trainers, but not our real ship. And so a couple of times during this 2 weeks here, they go into their real ship in suits and make sure that everything is where they expect it. It gives them a chance to put a little bit of Velcro on the walls, to put their timers up and things like that. You become accustomed to what it's like to climb down into the ship, because the hatch is up above you. It's at the top of the capsule that we launch in. And in the trainers, we usually come through an add-on hatch that's added to the side. And so here you practice dropping down in there, getting into your seat. And it's really tight, as you can see from the videos that we have.
Oh yeah.
It's very tight inside the Soyuz, and the crew they're not sitting in a chair. They're really laying on their backs in a seat pan that's been molded to their bodies to help protect them from landing loads, the dynamics of that.
So really their first chance to get inside the spacecraft is going to carry them to orbit. And like you said, 2 years coming to fruition just this last week, moving really quickly.
That's exactly right. And so it's a very busy time. It's exciting. You go through it and you look at it and just put your hands on everything, touch it, make sure that it's where you expect it, and kind of get comfortable. And that's a way of okay, on launch day then, okay, I've already strapped in a couple of times. I've been in here. We're ready to rock and roll. We're ready for it.
Ready for the ride.
You're ready? Yeah.
Okay, well, aside from some of these final tests and the fit checks and things like that, I know there are a lot of ceremonies and different traditions that come when you're flying on these Russian vehicles. What are some of the things that they're doing this week?
Yeah, some of those traditions are very different from the American side. One of the really neat ones is the crew is staying in the quarantine facility that we stay in Baikonur. It's called the Cosmonaut Hotel. It's not a classic hotel.
Not a 5-star resort.
No, it's not a 5-star. It's definitely a government facility. It's nice. It's no problem. But out behind there, this facility is kind of a compound. I mean, it's fenced and guarded and stuff. because the crew needs to be in a quarantine during that time.
Yep.
So nobody comes in contact with the crew that hasn't been medically cleared, and we minimize the amount of contact because you don't want to launch just on the verge of getting sick.
Yep.
It's the transition to space is bad enough without adding a cold or something on top of it too, and sharing it with your crewmates, which everybody would really love. So you're kind of cooped up in this facility, but out behind it, within the compound walls, and you're on the banks of the Sardarya River. It's a very historic place. It was actually the border of Alexander the Great's domain.
Oh, wow.
Right there. And this location is also on the Silk Highway for the ancient trade from China to Europe. And so it's a very historic kind of location, a little post out there. But behind the Cosmonaut Hotel, inside the compound, it's called Cosmonaut Alley or Cosmonaut Way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's trees lining this. The first tree was planted by Yuri Gagarin.
Oh, so this goes all the way back to the beginning.
This goes all the way back 50 years. And so I'm not sure Yuri planted it before he flew, but it was pretty close there. And so each crew, if you've not yet flown on a Russian rocket, then as part of this final preparation, you go out and plant your tree. And it's such a cool thing to go out and walking down these pathways here is a walk through history as you see the names, of the famous people from space history. And the Apollo Soyuz crew have their names out there too. They were recognized by the Russians and have trees out there. And so it's really a cool thing to take part in that, to go out and actually plant your tree and know that this place is on the edge of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
It is way out there, and there's now a tree with a little signpost on it with my name on it.
Wow.
As just one of these people that has stood there with these other explorers. And so it's really kind of a really neat tradition to be a part of that, and to walk through and see the Russians, and going way back to the Soviet days, and as well as many of the Americans now who have flown with the Russians and other partners from around the globe.
So a place really just steeped in tradition. What are some of the other things that you guys are doing during the week? I know there's a Red Square visit at some point.
A lot of the other things, the Red Square visit and the Kremlin visit, take place in the Moscow region before we leave there.
Okay.
The crew goes through final exams. They finish those up around 3.5 to 4 weeks before.
Okay.
Before launch, the big final exams in Russia, and then there's a little bit of downtime, week and a half or so, where you can finish. You're done with exams, you're done with training, and you can get your stuff packed up. School's out, but you can't relax too much. Kind of get your things packed up, take care of all the things you need to take care of before leaving the planet for half a year. And included in that is a trip to Red Square to lay flowers on the Kremlin wall to recognize the graves of some of the early explorers, like Yuri Gagarin and Sergei Korolev, who was the chief rocket designer back in the day. And it's a neat part of the tradition. And as an American, it was pretty humbling to be part of that and to imagine, because my early memories of seeing pictures of Red Square were not in a positive light.
Yep.
And it was an exotic place, but it was also a scary place, and we were at odds with each other. And so now for me to actually be walking on Red Square and to be participating in these kind of ceremonies was very humbling. It would have been impossible to imagine 20 or so years ago.
Oh yeah.
But now we're doing those kind of things. Now also in Baikonur during the quarantine time here, I know the crews, Suni especially, she's a runner, and I know she's running along the banks of the Sardarya River out there just about every day.
I think she's training to do a triathlon during her space flight at some point.
Well, the Summer Olympics are coming up, and so I don't think she's going to run, do a crazy long distance, but she's definitely athletic, and that for me that was a great thing. I really loved running there. With escort we can get out and take a jog along the river, and it's a very, very different place. There were times we had to change our route because there were camels, literally camels, like laying on the trail. And it's like, okay, don't go too close.
You were really kind of out on the edge of nowhere when you were out there.
It really feels like it. And that's that's kind of a neat feeling. And for me, I like to get out and jog too, get out in fresh air and do a lot of things outside. And knowing that I was going to be inside for half a year, I wanted to go out there and soak up a little bit of sun and just to smell the earth and that kind of thing. So I know that they're doing those kind of things too. They're doing some of the training they were doing yesterday. There was some rendezvous training, so they're practicing the manual flying skills, and that's mostly Yuri doing the flying with Suni and Aki assisting. And actually Suni was practicing doing some of the flying too. She's able to back him up if need be, which we don't expect to happen, but you train for those kind of things. And so they're shown here training on the simulator, and these controls, of course, it's not like laying in the Soyuz, but it's those are the actual controls that they use on the spacecraft, and he's looking at a screen that shows him an image like the image he'll see through what we call the periscope. There's final procedure reviews where you're going through your final books. Your main Soyuz instructor, who's been with you a lot, especially in that last year, and he'll go through, and you're going through everything you're going to do and reviewing it one more time and making sure you understand all the details and you're ready to go.
That training really just does not stop until you are strapped into that spacecraft ready to go. Let's touch on that real quick. Difference between launching on a Soyuz and a shuttle. Different sensations?
Oh yeah, it's a very different. For me, the first time I saw the full-up Soyuz, because we'd never see him, was when I was there as a backup crew member for Katie Coleman, and I wow, that's it.
That's
I'm used to the size of a shuttle, which is with the external tank and solid rocket boosters and everything, is a really massive rocket, and the Soyuz is not a big truck. It's very efficient at delivering people, though. So it hauls people and a couple hundred pounds of supplies, and it's very efficient at that. But it's a lot smaller vehicle. And what it's like out there, though, there's a little bit of difference. One thing that we'll see on Saturday, as the crew's going out to their launch, is they'll go through a full suit up and a pressure check of their suits, and where in the American program for shuttle flights, that was all done in a suit room with just the technicians and stuff. And then you do a final walkout and a wave to the crowd and get on the bus and go to the pad. In Kazakhstan, in Baikonur Cosmodrome, we're doing that with the press on the other side of glass.
Oh wow!
And our families, and usually some of our guests that come over are allowed to watch this too. So it's really kind of a strange thing to have all of these people watching and observing as you're going through a real pressure check of the suit. Their backup crew will be standing right behind them. They're ready to take their place if need be. And so you go through that, and then they'll walk out of that building and they'll actually salute into the head of the Russian Space Agency or the space program, depending on who the highest ranking person there might be. And the crew goes out and reports in. And this is the iconic image that we've seen in history and all our lives, of what it looks like for the Russians to walk out and salute in like that, and then get on the bus and go for a fairly short ride to the launch pad. Another thing that surprised me going out to the launch pad was just the number of people that were out there. There were quite a few people out there to document it, and a lot of the managers take you all the way out to the rocket itself and shake your hand and wave goodbye as you get on the elevator and head up to climb into the rocket. And so I was a little surprised at that, how many people are actually involved. And finally you get on the elevator. It's a really tiny elevator. And and go up to the top, and it's like, okay, now we're alone. It's just us and the very small crew that's helping us strap in and secure the hatches behind us. As you drop in, kind of a side hatch in the very top part. There's two pieces to the Soyuz that we can get into. The main capsule that we ride up and down in is kind of in the middle of this stack. The orbit module up above has a side hatch that we go through there into that small volume, and it's about a total of 6 cubic meters. And then we drop down into the descent module, we call it. And so we have the orbit module that's at the very top, and we come through a side hatch in that, and then we drop down through a hatch into the middle part, kind of a gumdrop shape descent module there, and all 3 crew members are in the descent module. And you take turns, the 2 guys on the outside, getting strapped in, and there's a lot of hoses and connectors to have oxygen line, a ventilation line, communication, and a biomedical. So the doctors are actually monitoring heart rate, some basic parameters. And that you do that, you start strapping in a little over about 2.5 hours prior to launch.
Okay. And like you said, you're not sitting up, you're down
you're
on your back.
back.
You're almost kind of
the seat
cocooned
itself,
in there.
Yeah, the seat itself it's a big metal pan that from your bottom up to the top of your head, and your knees are up and actually held by straps up into position. And there's the seat right there, and you see that the liner around it is actually form-fitted. These are just training units we see here, but the ones for flight are form-fitted to your body. They actually pour a mold over your body and build it, so it's like a jello mold that's holding your body perfectly. And so at this point, pre-launch, you're getting in, and you fit in that thing with just boo. And there's no the downside is there's very little room to move around.
Yeah.
By intent, it's designed so it's really tight. You go through the system checks. You check all of the parameters. You check that the handles and everything, nothing got bumped in the process of getting in. You have flight procedures that you're kind of looking at and strapping those down and making sure you've got the right pages kind of earmarked there, little tabs on them so you can find important things. And they'll go through. And then as the closeout crew is closing hatches behind you, we're activating the systems inside the spacecraft. Make sure ventilation, radios, all this carbon dioxide removal systems working and stuff like that. And then the closeout crew is backing their way out. And the hatch at the top here is the one that we will not open until after we've attached to the station. It's a great video of the inside of the orbit module. There's a little more room in here. That the silver container has a few days worth of food and stuff. This looks like there's a lot of room in the capsule, but there's really not. That little shelf area there is filled up with supplies that are all tied down. So that was a little surprise when you get into the real one. But anyway, you get strapped in about 2.5 hours prior. You go through the system checks and stuff, and then there's extra time added in to the schedule in case something needs to be repaired, a communication line's not working or something like that. So they leave a little bit of time, and every once in a while something comes up and you need it, so it's a good thing to do. Ours went perfectly fine, so we had time to just sit there and kind of talk a little bit. The ground's talking to us, and you spend a little quiet time too, kind of head in the game and looking at the procedures again, going through it one more time, thinking, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and making sure I can touch the controls that I was responsible for, that kind of stuff. When it's going really well, they have time to play a little music, and that's a kind of a neat tradition that the Russians have. They actually pump some crew choice music out to the launch pad as just a way of kind of helping the crew relax a little bit.
Do they take requests before you guys hop in?
They do take requests. That's right.
Well, that's an amazingly in-depth. So we know our next 3 crew members are going to be looking forward to doing that. They have all their ceremonies this week, steeped in tradition.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like an amazing place.
Well, I missed some of them for the walkout with the crew's staying in this quarantine facility, and when it's actually time to walk out, they sign the door to their rooms. Oh. And so we'll see that Saturday. There's a door signing ceremony, so everybody gets to sign the door to their room, and that these doors are when they fill up, I guess they move the doors to a museum, and they get started. The next crew start with a fresh door.
Are they getting full yet?
And they're getting there.
They're getting there.
Yeah, and then you walk out, and there'll be a Russian Orthodox priest will bless the crew, and that's their part of their tradition. There it involves a kind of a liberal application of holy water, which is always a little bit amusing to watch the crews as they get slightly drenched. And from there, it's walk out to the. There's a large crowd of people there, and waving and as the crew heads out. So it's all part of the traditions that are leading up to it. Now, once you get into the rocket and it's finally go time, the big difference from a shuttle flight was how quiet it is. On a space shuttle, a lot of the dynamics were from the solid rocket boosters that burn with a lot of popping and crackling, and people that were fortunate enough to see one in person, you can actually feel that.
Oh, I remember it just kind of hits you like a weight when the sound wave gets to you.
Yeah, exactly, and it kind of it pounds on you. You can feel it, and you can feel that by those dynamics coming up through the shuttle stack, and it actually makes it a little hard to read the displays and controls because everything's moving for the first 2 minutes. For the Soyuz, it's real quiet. It starts off and it's a little disconcerting to people that are used to watching the shuttle because the main engines come up, in a few seconds of checking, and then boom, the solids light and you leap off the pad.
Yep.
Soyuz moves off the pad more slowly, and the engines are running. It's about 8 seconds before it starts to move, and so it seems. Is everything okay?
Is it going?
Yeah, is it really going?
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat because the way the launch pad works is the rocket, it's not really bolted down the way we would have traditionally bolted ours down. It's held down by the weight. There's these big pads that are literally holding the side of the rocket, and the weight of the rocket pushes them down and creates the friction that holds it in place. So the rocket is suspended there, and once the rocket starts to lift off, it releases this, and the arms will just spring out of the way then, and so it's a very odd looking thing. As the first arms that are coming back, that's just some of the support stuff that includes the elevator and everything. At this point, the rocket's just held in place by these smaller arms that are literally just held there by the weight of the rocket itself, and you see those down around the base as the rocket comes to life and starts to light up. It's about 8 seconds, and it's a little slow motion here, but it's and just watch as the rocket starts to lift off. Then those are released. Now they're not bolted on; it's just held there by the mechanics of the weight. The ride's smooth. There's very little vibration in it, very little really sensation of sound or anything. I mean, you are inside the capsule, inside the helmet and everything. But after about a minute and a half or so, the escape rocket fires off. The Soyuz has some strap-on boosters, 4 boosters that are around the base to help it get moving, get off the pad, and start to clear the atmosphere too. And so it's multiple stages. This is the end of the second stage here as it falls away. We call it the second stage, and then the third stage lights up, and that pushes you to orbit. The whole thing just takes about 9 minutes.
Really quick.
You go from sitting still on the ground to going over 17,000 miles an hour, and you are 0G, weightless then, in just 9 minutes. And the way we do it now, once the vehicle gets to orbit, of course, it has to get activated now, and things like unfurling the solar arrays, which the Soyuz uses sunlight to generate electricity. So you unfurl the solar arrays, go through the other system checks, and then there's a couple of burns typically to circularize the orbit, and then to set up the rendezvous. And what they'll be doing is setting up a rendezvous about 2 days after launch. It's about 50 hours after launch. The crew will be docking to the space station, and so that's a real precise maneuvers to get the orbit fine-tuned. So after the first few orbits around the Earth after launch, they'll be doing some of those little maneuver corrections.
Is it a little cramped in there for 2 days, I'd imagine?
Well, if you were just inside the capsule, it would be almost intolerable because there's not room to stretch your legs out. It's really tight. Once you get to orbit and take care of the maneuvers that you need to do, and there's some pressure checks to make sure that orbital module, the top part, is holding pressure. So you go through very careful checks. Once that all checks out, then you can open up the hatch and get out of your seats and get changed out of the suits. You don't spend the full 2 days in those suits. and it's nice to have a little bit of room to stretch out and then get a bite to eat, and your food, your water are up there, things like that.
And then once you dock, you have more room than you know what to do with
Oh,
once you're on board the station.
It's a big
right?
difference. You bet. When you, I mean, even the two habitable parts of the Soyuz spacecraft have just 10 cubic meters total. Before you add seats, instrument panels, and all these systems
Takes up
and
a
stuff,
lot.
which take up half of it.
Yep.
So there's not much volume to work with. Once you get to the station, it's really fun to watch, especially new guys, as they're coming across the hatch, because it's like, wow, this, in the Soyuz you can stick out your arms and touch both walls, and there's not, you're floating, but you're not traveling. You're not flying anywhere. You're floating there, but you're not really propelling yourself and moving around.
You don't get to have fun with it yet.
You're not having fun with it yet. No time for stupid astronaut tricks yet. When you get into the station, though, it's actually very disorienting at first, because it's so big and you're trying to figure out how to move, because you haven't had any practice moving. And so you watch them. Of course, none of these guys going up this time are rookies. So I guarantee they're going to be up
pros
there
by the time they don't have to crawl before they run.
No, they'll be fine. They'll be a little bit tentative right at first as they're getting their space legs back.
It's like riding a bike, though.
It's like riding a bike, though. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, we'll certainly be looking forward to that launch coming up this Saturday.
Yeah.
Expedition 29 Commander Mike Fossum, thanks so much for coming on and give us this great insight into everything that they're going through this week and what they have to look forward to a little bit later.
Hey, it's exciting times. I'm really excited for them. It's a long training road, and I wish I was there. It's a good time, and I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, well, we'll be following along. Hopefully we see you up there again sometime soon.
Hold that thought. We'll see.